The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network and our family of broadcast affiliates worldwide. If you'd like to send an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Wow. This has been quite a night here in the X Zone, hasn't it, gang? My guest this hour is Wilbur Allen. And Wilbur is an inventor, he is an engineer, and he is an contactee. And Wilbur, thanks for joining us here in the X Zone. And I was wondering if you could tell us about the contact that you had going back to when I believe you were 5 in the United Kingdom?
I was 5, and my parents were stationed at a base called RAF Sculthorpe, which was a joint venture United States Air Force base. And at that base, one night I awoke after my parents had put me to bed to see my bedroom door open, and in walked 5 small humanoids in silver spacesuits. They had the actual physical description of a gray, and one of them touched me, and where he touched me, I believe, inserted something into me. And from that point on, for about 11 or 12 years after that, I vomited nightly. When the vomiting stopped, objects started landing in front of me.
What kind of objects?
Spheres, primarily, on several occasions. For example, on July 16, 2002, at the U.S. Capitol building, I documented a formation of green fireball UFOs, which materialized above my head. And it's ironic that I would have a camera on a tripod at the time when that event took place. So I took this 3.5-minute photograph of these luminous green spheres that materialized above my head, and in the 3.5 minutes, the photograph showed that the object maintained multiple positions in the sky simultaneously, and at one point it generated what I believe to be a self-generated Stargate and flew into that Stargate as the camera was recording its actions. So I'm getting these objects that are, without doubt, unlike anything anyone's ever seen before here on Earth. And what's interesting is the objects that I do photograph have been seen by humans, but those humans are astronauts that are with NASA, and with the NASA footage that I was able to obtain, was able to conclude that what I documented was indeed documented in space starting from Apollo 7.
Wow. Exonation. Wilbur Allen is a former White House Air Force One engineer for ABC News and a contract photographer at National Geographic. So this guy knows what he's talking about. He's also the author of a number of books, including A Close Encounter of the Third Kind, The Washington Monument, Close Encounter of the Third Kind, Baltimore, Maryland, and A Close Encounter of the Third Kind at the U.S. Capitol. Let me ask you a direct question. Do you think the government or the governments of the world are suppressing the information about UFOs? Is there a truth embargo? And if so, why?
They are suppressing that information. They made contact possibly in the 40s and in the 50s. And for some reason, they want to keep it a secret because they believe that it would destabilize society. But wait a minute, society is already destabilized.
Exactly.
It's not from extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
It's an economic destabilization. So what we have here is something that is absolutely misleading. For example, I document with my technology from the roof of my home, which is 4 blocks from the White House, on a daily basis, objects which are 100% consistent, and I can show you objects starting from 2012 to an object photographed this morning, and the objects from 2012 and the object photographed this morning are exactly the same. So we have 4 years of documentation from the same fixed airspace. But the White House says, and I'm in the same airspace as the White House, mind you, that there is no ET activity and no ET cover-up. Now, wait a minute. Who do you believe now? If I'm getting these samples in my airspace, and I'm 4 blocks from the White House, which means we are in the same airspace, and here's a guy with his iPad sitting at a desk saying, oh, no, this isn't real, and it doesn't possibly happen in Washington, who do you believe? Is it a matter of how they want to smooth things over and keep us misinformed, which I believe is the case? Because with what I'm documenting on a nightly basis, the trajectory associated to each of the objects that I'm photographing is consistently the same, and that trajectory is in line with the White House. So we have data here, and we have the government saying things that are completely contrary to what the data clearly indicates is indeed happening.
How can this suppression of information continue in a world that is so technologically advanced?
You know, that's a good question, but regardless to the amount of data that's out there, and I believe what I have is some of the world's best data, regardless with having that level of information, it's still not enough. I'm still getting people saying, oh, they're meteors. Well, wait a minute. A meteor does not have a consistent trajectory associated to it on a nightly basis, in fact. And, you know, with the misidentification of things and the way people want to believe that what a UFO is supposed to look like is supposed to look like something from Star Wars or, you know, some of these films that are out right now, that's a complete misconception. They've been brainwashed into believing that things are like they are in make-believe land.
Living in Washington, I'm sure that you've done research into the 1952 Washington flap. What is your take on that? How could that have not been proof enough for skeptics that, you know, these were not...
Well, it's ironic you would mention that. That was July 16, 1952. And on July 16, 2002, exactly 50 years after the fact, from the same location, I documented the green spheres materialize above my head. What was interesting, though, is during my encounter, there were several U.S. Capitol Police officers on duty, and they reported what they saw and made reports associated to it. And the photographs that I took were consistent with their reports. And that events that preceded that, especially from the reflection pool where there were a discovery of 25 dead ducks and 50 dead squirrels on one side of the building, it was interesting that what I documented the night of my close encounter, July 16, 2002, on the side where the ducks and the squirrels died was this large luminous sphere that materialized above the reflection pool. And it's interesting, with the level of technology that I'm utilizing right now, which is a D5 Nikon, I've got the exact same objects that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building in 2002, now on motion picture at 60 frames per second. So we have without doubt proof that whatever these objects were that I documented in 2002 and whatever was documented in 1952 are still here.
Why hasn't this been sent out around the world on the media? You know, if they want to, they put a number of stupid things for the public to see. Why wouldn't they put something like this?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm getting, for example, U.S. Park Services has cameras which are placed in strategic locations around Washington.
Sure.
And some of those cameras are pointed towards the Washington Monument, the U.S. Capitol building. And the samples that they're getting are consistent with the samples that I'm getting over my roof. But what's even more interesting is the objects that I'm photographing over my roof were initially reported in 1986 in the skies of Alaska when Japan Airlines Flight 1628 encountered what this flight captain said to be a craft that was 2 to 3 aircraft carriers in length. And what I'm getting here in Washington, D.C. is larger than that.
Wow. What size do you estimate it at?
I'm saying based on my physical documentation, some of the objects that I photographed could be possibly 5 aircraft carriers in length.
And yet, these craft didn't appear on commercial radar, commercial traffic radar, or military?
Well, based on what I'm getting, they are appearing, materialized for a brief few seconds, and then dematerialized in the same region of space that they materialized into. And that in 1990, on board Mir, Kip Thorne documented anomalies associated to Earth's magnetic fields above the North and South poles, which he said were facilitating wormholes, which they documented objects materialize and fly into Earth's atmosphere, or objects leaving Earth's atmosphere and dematerializing in the same region of space that they materialized into. And that said, without doubt, that first of all, the United States government and the Russians discovered that these anomalies, which NASA has this discussion on portals associated to the magnetic fields of Earth, where they discussed essentially what was happening in the Bermuda Triangle and what was happening in the Alaska Triangle as associated to deviations in the magnetic field. So people who are vanishing, aircraft that are vanishing, boats that are vanishing, all vanished because of these deviations of the magnetic field. But NASA's got it that these portals exist in space, while my data clearly indicates these portals can exist anywhere on Earth, especially at ground level, where people have mysteriously vanished without a trace. And it clearly indicates that they would have to walk into something that would make them disappear, and that would possibly be a portal, which NASA did confirm does exist.
So once again, are we saying that these craft just materialize and then dematerialize, and that's why they may not be appearing on radar, because they may be within the diameter of the sweep of the radar disk or the radar array?
They're only visible on radar when they are physically manifest into this airspace. But based on my examples, and I'm filming at 60 frames per second, and at 60 frames per second, when I slow my film down 92%, meaning I'm looking at it at 8% its actual frame rate, I see incrementally the object in its original form incrementally manifest into the airspace, meaning that it's materializing frame by frame as it flies into the airspace. And as it materializes and solidly manifests into this realm, the sounds associated to it also appear. And so I'm able to record the mechanical sounds associated to these objects along with the contrails associated to the propulsion matrix that they utilize. And I'm getting them consistently the same on dates. For example, I documented on August the 13th, 2013, August the 14th, 2014, August the 15th, 2015, and August the 16th, 2016, the exact same thing. Now, what is the probabilities of documenting something 4 years in a row exactly the same and almost on the exact same date? That's impossible, other than it indicates without a doubt that these objects are intelligent controlled.
Could these objects be traversing different dimensions or different multiverses, and this is why we just get glimpses of them?
What's happening is in discussing the portals that were discovered in 1990, I believe the extraterrestrials set up a network of portals associated to these wormholes where they are able to enter and exit areas of interest at ease. And, you know, what was interesting, in 1952, when the squadron of UFOs buzzed the U.S. Capitol building and they scrambled F-86 Sabres to intercept these objects, they vanished. And what they didn't realize is that they went inside a self-generated wormhole, which I've documented, which clearly exists, and they're able to go between realms without detection. And once they're here, you can see them on radar, but once they go into this wormhole, they are not detectable at all.
What is the White House stance on UFOs?
They believe that none of it is real. They don't believe that there's any cover-up associated to it. They are actually some of the biggest fabricators of misconceptions, especially regarding anomalous activities associated to UFOs, on record, as mentioned. And there's a NBC interview associated to the White House discussing the possibilities of ET and ET cover-ups, and they're saying, oh, no, there's no ET or ET cover-up. But again, I'm telling you, I'm 4 blocks from the White House, and I'm getting these things on a nightly basis consistently the same.
Is it possible that these are just plasma balls or some sort of energy that has yet to be discovered, and that there is a reason why they're appearing on such a regular basis?
It would be impossible. That would indicate that they would be random associations to them. But what I'm getting is consistently the same, inclusive trajectories. Everything is consistently the same. I can show you 576 exact examples taken over 576 days. You would think it's the same photograph. Now, how is that possible? If it's a meteor, which is random, and the probabilities associated to a meteor being captured on a daily basis is astronomical. It's almost impossible. But I'm getting them on a daily basis.
All right. So what are the members of the scientific community, the members of the astronomical societies, the other members of the media saying about what you've discovered?
Most of them are saying nothing, because a lot of those are stuck on misconceptions, especially as we discussed earlier, where they want to believe a UFO is going to look like the Millennium Falcon and it's going to have this structural consistency, nothing like the realities of what I'm documenting. And what's interesting, my associate, who's recently passed away, was Dr. Edgar Mitchell, discussed without any hesitation that what he encountered on the lunar surface in terms of spacecraft were plasma-based balls of light, cylinder balls of light, or cylindrical-shaped objects which are consistent of light. So that, without doubt, with these kind of men definitely authenticating the data that I'm presenting to them, it indicates that there is a level of cover-up that's associated to everything that I'm documenting. And the United States government and most governments associated to the world powers don't want the people to know that there are extraterrestrials possibly based in our country, in the countries that are all associated with these activities.
Do you think, based on the research that you've done, that these ETs pose a threat to the security or to the safety of humanity?
Well, I can't say that there's a threat associated to it, first of all, because I'm documenting these things, and obviously they know I'm documenting them because I'm getting them in close proximity. And nothing that I've ever encountered has been hostile. It may be creepy to look at when it manifests itself, but outside of that, there was nothing hostile there.
Have you ever felt an attempt by the craft to communicate with you?
I do have instances of, for example, of what I'm documenting over my roof now here in Washington, D.C., which I initially documented in Area 51, Nevada in 2012. And in 2012, when I initially documented it, in the desert, something told me to pack my gear and leave immediately, which I complied. And within 1 minute of receiving that message telepathically, my crew was arrested by 70 to 80 Area 51 security personnel, and they were face down in the dirt with M16s pointed at their heads. So the aliens warned me that this was about to go down 1 minute before it happened.
Well, let me ask you this.
I was the only person that was able to get out with the data.
Let me ask you this. Were you trespassing on government property?
I did not go near the area that was prohibited from entering. I was at the perimeter. And what's interesting is I'm not interested in of anything that's at ground level. I was focused primarily on the airspace.
All right.
And
so were there
in
any
the airspace, I got these objects materializing.
So were there any signs saying no trespassing?
Plenty of them.
So you broke the law?
Not at the perimeter. At the perimeter where it's public space, no, I didn't. But you see, we're not going onto the ground, I'm scanning the airspace above it, which is public domain.
Well, wouldn't it, even in restricted airspace, is public domain?
Well, if you are looking at it from an area that's not within the restricted zone, exactly, yes.
So what, like, how are these people supposed to know whether you're a spy or whether you're just a curious citizen? Like, they've got a job to do, and I'm glad that they're there and that they do their job.
They don't. They treat everyone and anything that crosses into that zone exactly the same.
Which they should. Which they should.
They do.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in their zone. I was not anywhere near it. I was, in fact, possibly 100 feet, 200 feet from the perimeter. But that doesn't stop me from looking in the skies above that area.
So why wouldn't you go to a different location that wouldn't put you in harm's way or at risk of being arrested?
What my crew did was one thing, what I did was another, and I looked at all the possibilities, and again, keeping in mind, I'm a former White House engineer.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do is trespass on U.S. government property, which is a federal offense.
Right.
But there's nothing stopping you from looking in the sky at a perimeter's point of view at all. And I did. And what I documented clearly indicated that the activity in the airspace above Groom Lake was extraterrestrial.
How can you prove that?
Because I don't know of any objects that slither like snakes and materialize that would send a thought to you to tell you to move. Do you?
Well, I wasn't there, so I can't give you an answer on that.
It's something that's clearly outside our level of technology, and what I experienced and what I documented and what my crew documented and experienced were exactly the same, except they got their data taken away from them, and I got to go with mine because the aliens told me to leave immediately.
All right, that's one way of looking at it. That's your take on it. But what did the military say, or the security police say? Well,
they took the tapes from the cameras that were there.
Yeah.
Gave them their equipment back, but kept the tapes. And gave them a little warning and told them to go on their way.
Right.
But I didn't get to that because I was gone before it went down.
Was this the only communication you've had with aliens?
No, on several occasions. The same object that communicated to me telepathically in Area 51 materialized in Sedona, Arizona, and it commanded me to set up my camera and focus my camera in an area, which I did. And within 2 minutes of hitting start, it documented this object materialized in that airspace. And 2 hours later, it came back and dematerialized in the same airspace it materialized into. So I was able to document the same object from Area 51 now 2 months later in Sedona.
Your story sounds awfully familiar to that of Billy Meyer.
And, I mean, everything is consistently the same. When you do talk to most of us that do have these experiences, they'll basically tell you the same things. What's different, though, is I'm able to show you photographically what I've encountered, while some people don't have that level or that type of technology that would enable them that flexibility or privilege to show you what they're encountering.
Are you aware of the Billy Meyer case?
Yes.
Would you not say that your case parallels that case of, in the sense that Billy Meyer also is able to provide photographic evidence of what he claims?
Yes, it's consistently the same. What's even more interesting is what I documented in 2002 at the U.S. Capitol building. Betty Hill photographed, and I was looking at Betty Hill's photograph, which Kathy Martin, who's her niece, gave me to analyze. And the objects Betty Hill photographed were 100% consistent with what I experienced and documented at the U.S. Capitol building July 16, 2002.
And
so we have other people who documented these things.
When did Betty Hill take those photos?
From what Kathy was telling me, it was possibly in the 60s or late 70s that she photographed objects that kept visiting them. And she had photographed on several occasions several objects which were identified as lab errors because at that time she was using a film camera, and what they looked at were blotches of different colored light. So automatically they assumed it was an error in development. But it's consistent with, without a doubt, what I documented at the U.S. Capitol building.
Once again, what has been the general public and scientific and other experts in the field? What is the consensus of what you present them as your evidence of extraterrestrials?
I get no feedback at all. Absolute silence.
Why do you think that is?
I can't answer that, but my research is based on a comparative form of analysis, so I'm able to show you a plethora of data, all consistently the same. So if I'm showing you 60 samples of an object, you can conclude, at least hopefully based on the first 5 samples, that there's relevance associated to the presentation. But here I'm showing you 60, possibly 500 examples of an object.
So why don't
even then, it doesn't settle with most people because they've been indoctrinated into believing that these craft are going to look like the Millennium Falcon.
All right, but even if that is what their conception of a UFO would look like, would they not report seeing strange objects, strange balls of light, strange plasma-looking appearances and disappearances in the skies overhead? I really can't see how this would go unnoticed.
Well, there are people who do notice these things and do document them. I'm looking at a lot of the reports that are on Newport, Peter Davenport's website.
Yeah.
And it's all consistently the same. So what it says, though, with all of the reports all indicating either it's the same object going from the East Coast to the West Coast or multiple objects which are consistently the same, what it indicates is that they're here, without a doubt. It would be one thing if I showed you a picture and there were no reports associated to it, but I can show you 500 photographs and 1,000 to 10,000 reports associated to this object. So with the reports and the photographs, we have forensic documentation associated to it. We could clearly conclude, based on the evidence, that the object itself is indeed real.
But how do we know this object is from outer space and not a secret government project?
Well, unless we look at the reports associated to them, and I've got an example that was photographed in 1960s by Grumman, which was initially designing the ground surface surveillance technology which they utilize now in space. And in 1960, they documented what I'm describing as the band of light UFO, which was initially reported by Flight 1628 over Alaska in 1986. But they documented this object with their ground surveillance technology in 1960. So they knew without a doubt that the technology, that these aliens were in their airspace and tracking their satellites, so they documented them. So with the data and evidence associated to the research that I'm able to do with my technology that already exists, we can conclude without a doubt that humans didn't have this technology in 1960, and based on the evidence in 1960, which they said they didn't know what this object was, would clearly indicate they had no idea that this was indeed an extraterrestrial spacecraft, so it's not ours.
All right, let's suppose that the ETs have been here since the 1940s, okay? Apparently, what they're doing isn't affecting any life on this planet.
At all.
Obviously, they're not a threat to us. So why should we even care about this? They're just part of the universe. They're part of reality. Okay, they're here, okay, so why do we need to make such a big case about this?
Well, first, we're humans, and to the best of my ability, at least from what I understand as I was being raised, that there should be no extraterrestrial life out there. At least that was the basis of what I was raised in believing to when I was coming up as a child. Aliens and all this stuff was not real, but it is real. And what they can't conceal from you is the fact that they have been coming here for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's even more compelling in terms of actual evidence is a 10,000-year-old Dogon star chart in Africa, which NASA confirmed with the Hubble telescope to be 100% accurate. They didn't have that capability to draw a star chart, at least not to my knowledge, 10,000 years ago, because that would be too primitive for someone to have that advanced kind of knowledge. But yet the star chart was 100% consistent and accurate, at least based on Hubble data.
All right. So once again, let's use this as a great example. This star chart that was found proves that these ETs have been visiting this planet for thousands of years.
Yes.
So what?
That's just the point. Okay, so we have advancements in certain civilizations. We have the construction of the pyramids, which we still cannot do today. That's so what? There's a major issue here because there's technology associated to some of these things that are ancient that we still are unable to replicate. So if we're unable to replicate it and it's hundreds of thousands of years old, that must indicate that it was advanced, at least to our standards, 100,000 years ago.
But what if these marvels were actually really done by humans who had a better understanding of engineering and the way to do things than we have now?
Where did they come from, and where did they get the technological expertise to create such feats?
How about trial and error?
Impossible.
Why?
Impossible.
Why?
Because if you look at the consistency of each block that constructs the pyramid, they're accurate within millimeters. They're so accurate you can't even put a piece of paper between the blocks. That's how accurate it is. Where did they get that level of technology? We still can't do that today. And we're advanced.
Mm-hmm. Are we?
Oh.
Or is this the going around the circle again, that we've lost a lot of what we used to know, and we actually think today that we're, because of all the technology that we have, that we are better than any other part of our own history? I think that's naive.
It is naive, and would be naive to even assume that thousands of years ago that humans could have been more advanced than we are today. We can't possibly discount that as a possibility.
Right. So
but we have to look at also that there may have been another source of intelligence associated to those advancements, and that other source of intelligence may indeed have been extraterrestrial.
I think that society uses extraterrestrials as a downing of the intelligence of humans. I really do. I think that there are people who put the extraterrestrials right up there beside their gods. And I think that's wrong. I think to try and say that humanity is so stupid that we could not have done these seven wonders and the marvels that we have so graciously cherished throughout history, I find it very insulting to the human race.
That may indeed be the case, but until we know otherwise, it would be an error for us to conclude that, okay, humans did do it, because we don't know that. We can say that there's a possibility that they may have developed a technology that would allow them to mill stones perfectly to the point where when you construct them, that everything fits perfectly like an erector set. But I can imagine 100,000 years ago a human having that level of technology at all, or even understanding how to pick up a block 100,000 tons.
So are you saying?
Impossible.
So you're saying it is possible?
It is possible, yes.
Okay.
But highly unlikely that it was human ingenuity.
But it still is possible it was.
It's a possibility that it was,
but we don't know. I would give it the same possibilities that it was extraterrestrials. Because we
Exactly.
do not know for a fact. We do not know for a fact whether extraterrestrials would have the engineering capabilities to do the pyramids. We like to. There are many who like to think that there's an extraterrestrial connection here, so that they don't have to fill in the blanks of what really happened. It's a lot easier to say the aliens did it than to try and figure out how humanity did it. I agree with that. But all these years later, 40 years, let's see, Roswell was 1947. Then you've got the Phoenix Lights. Then you've got the Stephenville case. Then you've got, let me see, what other great UFO sightings were there? The ones that you've talked about tonight in Washington. All these cases, and still no smoking gun.
Well, there's a plethora of evidence, all of it saying that indeed whatever these objects are, they're more advanced or not in our realm of technology. But even with all of the data, it does not seem to sink in. It's almost like they want to believe, but let's not believe it.
I think it would be a lot easier if these so-called aliens would just materialize and show themselves once and for all. Like, what are they hiding from? What are they afraid of? Are they afraid of us?
Getting shot.
Well, if they're that advanced, wouldn't they have the capabilities of protecting themselves in a way that wouldn't cause a nuclear war? Like, you've got to look at it. You've got to look at it. You've got to look at it from the other side.
The first thing you do, if you see something land in your yard, you're going to go grab your shotgun.
No, I'll grab my camera.
Well, in some cases, you'll grab your shotgun because you're going to feel threatened by whatever this object was that landed you had never seen before, and it was unlike anything you had even imagined. So there's that reaction that you have to look at, and aliens got to think about, if we're going to land and I'm going to get shot, is it going to be worth coming down there to visit these people? I don't think so.
All right, now let's say that these are extraterrestrials, and they have a much more advanced technology than we have. Why is it then that they allow themselves to be seen? Would they not have the ability to cloak their existence? God, we've got that with the F-117 fighters and so on. Stealth technology is not unknown to us. And, why haven't these ETs devised a method to stealth them from human view?
Well, it's interesting. I'm showing, or at least I have explained at some point, how they manifest into the airspace incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how they manifest when I say that there's consistency associated to the structure, because as you see it materializing, the structure consistency is still there. But as it dematerializes, it's the same thing in the reverse sense, where I'm getting an object, it'll fly by, and as it flies by, it completely vanishes, and as it vanishes, so do the sounds associated to it. So it had to go into something which I'm going to conclude is a portal, and as it entered into the portal, so that the sounds associated to it.
It's either that or they have a baffling device. Like we've got baffling devices on our submarines. We have baffling devices on our aircraft. So why couldn't they have it? This is something that boggles me. People say they're so smart, and yet they show tendencies of being so stupid.
Oh yeah, there's inconsistency there, but again, it's a matter of if you're in the right place at the right time and just happen to look in the right spot to see them materialize. And what I'm saying, and with my research, that I have a fixed pool of analysis. I set up my camera on a nightly basis in one position, aimed straight up 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And in my fixed pool of analysis on a nightly basis, I'm getting repeating events, starting from 2012. So I can show you almost 600 to 800 exact same events over a course of 4 years that indicate without a doubt that there's intelligent control associated to these things.
Have you ever asked members of the credible and accredited media, I'm not talking about these these wackadoodles that call themselves reporters. I mean like ABC News, CBS News, NBC, even CNN, I'll give them a little bit of credit here, to come with you to witness what you are seeing and what you are filming.
I in fact, have television shows, which I have
No.
No.
I'm asking you about the media, because all these television shows, they are so phony, it's not even funny. I don't even want to go there. But I mean, news reports.
Think about it like this. These news crews, and we're talking a commercial news camera, for example, even though, it does look great when you see it on television, when you turn off the lights, the camera basically sucks. So they don't have the level of technology to essentially go out like I am with the cameras that I use.
Well, if
my B5 has got a 4 million ISO rating.
Okay, but that's great.
A camera can't do anything like that.
That's great. I'm happy for you. So if you went to these networks, these credible news outlets, and said, but you'll need this type of equipment, I'm sure that if they believed the story and they wanted to get this story and broadcast it, that they would also be able to rent the same camera that you have. It would be worth their while. So is that the only reason you haven't gone to the credible media, because you don't believe they have the technology to film what you see?
No, I do go to the credible media. The credible media comes to me for data. So it's not like I'm not putting the information out there.
Well, how come we haven't seen this on the news?
I could not answer that. It's not something that's public interest. They're more concerned about Hillary and Donald Trump. They're more concerned about Beyonce and Miley Cyrus.
Exactly.
They're more concerned about the things that are just superficial than they are about realities of UFOs in their airspace. It's because the public doesn't care.
Why should the public care?
Well,
if the government,
it's irrelevant to most people, they don't think it's real anyway. So it's a bunch of kooks like myself just happens to be kooky and photographing these things, and they think I'm using CGI to do it. So okay, whatever you think is possible, go ahead.
But you must admit that if the government isn't worried about it, if the FAA is not worried about it, if the commercial pilots are not worried about it.
But we don't know that.
Well, they still fly.
You may not know that. They may not put any information out there. We're concerned about UFOs. But they may not tell you that because, think about it. How many commercial pilots even talk about UFOs that are still flying?
I don't know. When I get on a plane, I don't. The first thing I do is not ask my pilot if he believes in UFOs or if he's ever seen a UFO.
Exactly. So they're not going to talk about it. It's not like something, and if they do see something, they keep it to themselves. They may make a log of it. They may take a photograph of it. Outside of that, it doesn't go any further because they want to keep their jobs.
All right, there's a number of members of the military who have come out and said that they have firsthand knowledge of extraterrestrials. We've heard this from astronauts. We've heard this from military pilots. My question is, how can we take the word of someone who's taken an oath not to divulge any secret information, and this would be classified as secret information because these people who have come out and talked about it said that they're breaking their oath? Why would we take their word?
Well, it was interesting. When I documented the green fireball, the crew of Apollo 7, the crew of Apollo 11, the crew of Apollo 14, 16, and 17 documented these green spheres en route to the moon, on the lunar surface, and coming back from the moon. So when I photographed my sample of the green spheres, which just happens to be one of the best samples of the anomaly in the world, because I had a high-definition camera at the time, it worked to their advantage to go ahead and say, yes, this is what we encountered in space. And, for example, Buzz Aldrin, during Apollo 11, I think it was Neil Armstrong that filmed it with a 16-millimeter Bolex. Their footage is consistent with what I documented at the U.S. Capitol building. It's also consistent with what I'm imaging with this D5 Nikon which I've got at 60 frames per second, which shows without a doubt that whatever these green spheres are, they're not utilizing conventional transportation means because it's in multiple places in the sky simultaneously.
Would you say that there's a connection between these green spheres and the Foo Fighters of World War II?
Yes, they're exactly the same.
You know, let me ask you this. I have a television producer friend who can get his hands on any camera. What I would like to know is if I could set him up with you with the exact same camera that you use, would you be willing to take him and have him photograph alongside with you these spheres?
Or whatever anomalies that would show up in that airspace, I have no problems with that, because if I can photograph it, I'm sure another camera with the same level of technology would be able to do the same, and I would welcome a second perspective associated to it.
I will make it happen.
Okay.
I have your email address. I will contact you after the show tomorrow sometime. I will also contact him, and we will make this happen, because I want to prove you right. I don't want to prove you wrong.
Well, I'm getting on a nightly basis from a fixed pool of analysis everything that I'm showing you, and it's no CGI there. It would be something highly improbable for me to try to fake this, because then my reputation would be at stake.
Exactly.
So yes, please do.
You see, and the media likes to play God, and you know what? You're right. They're more interested in Hillary and what's the other guy's name, Trump, than they are about anything else. If it don't bleed, it don't lead. So let's do this. I'll make the arrangements. I will have all the information sent to you, and you can get the information to me, and we'll have a conference call with my friend. And let's do it. Okay?
That's not a problem.
All right. Now, listen, where are your books available, Wilbur?
My books are available on Amazon.com. And anyone interested in my research can look up my work at UFODC.com. There are 23 chapters associated to my website, 61,000 examples.
I know, it's a great site. I went there.
Absolutely. And my YouTube channel is Wilbur Allen YouTube. I've got over 900 motion picture, high-definition motion picture samples, all consistently the same, showing airborne anomalies taken from my fixed pool of analysis.
We've got about 3 minutes. I'd like to get your take on the Phoenix Lights.
I think the Phoenix Lights was a giant spacecraft. What's interesting is on July 16, 2002, when I had my close encounter with the green spheres, when I photographed the green spheres was this extremely large L-shaped anomaly, which was cutting a hole in the clouds as it was descending into the airspace.
Right.
And that it was, at least based on the description from what people said they encountered at the Phoenix event when they saw the lights, which what they said was a large craft of some sort which could land easily 10 to 12 jumbo jets on its wings.
Wow.
So it's all relatively the same based on my data, that whatever this large L-shaped object was that I photographed coming out of the skies was consistent with what people described that they witnessed during the Phoenix Lights event.
What part of the responsibility that when it comes to UFOs that people expect a certain type of craft, a certain way that it will appear or disappear, how much of the responsibility does Hollywood and these so-called reality TV shows have?
They're putting misconceptions out there because Hollywood is putting out make-believe objects, while the realities are the objects I'm photographing are completely different and have luminous qualities associated to them. nothing that would be metallic or as a Millennium Falcon would look, or a Death Star, nothing like that at all. I mean, Hollywood is trying to mislead things, and they're doing an excellent job with it because people want to believe what they see in Star Wars is the real deal, but it's not.
You know what? You make perfect sense. You really do. And I'm sorry if you think I was a little hard, but I had to see how serious you were. Because doing this show for a number of years, there's a lot of people out there who like to blow smoke up your wazoo, if you know what I mean.
BS artists, yes.
Yeah. But I want to see you get the proof that you need. And like I said, I will take care of things on this end. We will make it happen.
Let's see what happens. Because I can guarantee you, if I get it, and that person is using the same technology I am, that they're going to get it also.
Wilbur, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. I love your website. I love your tenacity. And I love the fact that you stick by your guns.
I'm not trying to blow smoke up anybody's butt here.
I know that.
You know, I try to keep everything as real as possible. My research is based on a comparative form of analysis. If I show you one object, I'm able to show you 90 or 100 samples associated to it, so there's consistency associated to it. I try to do things scientifically.
Yeah.
That's different than try to BS people with a smoke job.
It certainly is. Wilbur, we have to say so long for tonight, but once again, thank you so much for joining us. And I will be in touch with you tomorrow, my friend.
Thank you, sir. And have everyone check out my website, ufodc.com.
We will. Take care, buddy.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Exonation, that's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It is truly a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. So until tomorrow night, when once again the X-Zone comes your way, always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. From everyone here to everyone out there, good night now.